The elegant estate is the envy of the neighborhood. No expense has been spared, from the fountains to the gardens to the stately decor. Who could have known this Libertyville landmark would soon be rechristened Murder Mansion? But for now, the Rouse family is cruising on Easy Street. Today, Patriarch Bruce is teaching his two sons, eldest Kurt and young Billy, a thing or two about detailing a classic car. It's a passion he's turned into a multi-million-dollar business.
Bruce bought a gas station when he was still in his teens, and that has now expanded into a slew of gas stations.
Bruce Rouse builds his wealth up literally from nothing with just a lot of determination and a lot of sweat. He's the quintessential can-do American sort of guy.
Of course, being king of the hill comes at a steep price.
Bruce was busy building his empire, so he didn't spend a lot of time at home.
Bruce was a workaholic, the type of man that would get up at the crack of dawn and not return home from work until well after the sun went down.
Luckily, Bruce's wife, Darlene, is the perfect keeper of his kingdom. Libertyville's answer to June Cleaver, with a modern twist.
Darlene is a stay-at-home mom, and as Bruce has accumulated more wealth, she has started to compliment him in the way that many women do, joining the right clubs, becoming active in civic organizations.
She's a physically very attractive woman and made a fantastic foil to Bruce Rouse.
Darlene just loves to dote on her children, especially middle child Robin. For all outward appearances, the Rouses lead quite the charmed life. But things are about to get very messy. Tonight, Queen Darlene has a special surprise planned for her little princess. An event to honor Robin's high school graduation.
She's coming, everyone get in
And like everything the Rouses do, it's a silver-studded affair. The party is a chance for Darlene and Bruce to indulge their beautiful brood.
Kurt, the oldest son, was looked to as having maybe the most potential and the most responsibility placed on his shoulders.
He went to private school, a wonderful school.
But these days, it's getting hard to see Kurt's finer qualities through all the scruff.
A lot of people call him Wolfman. You know, he's got really long hair down to his shoulders, a big beard.
Is he charming? Yes. Motivated? No. Little brother Billy, on the other hand, is a clean-cut chip off the old block.
Billy has a special relationship with his dad. He feels very comfortable with his dad.
They would go out and they would do things together, sometimes with guns, and go out and shoot, or they would, do things related to the family business.
Seems Bruce and Billy are two sides of the same coin. But everyone knows that middle sister Robin is the star of the show.
Robin is the princess of the Rouse family. She's basically given whatever she wants. Her father likes to spoil her. Her mother likes to spoil her.
There's no question she was kind of a pampered girl.
She has charisma, she has charm, she's attractive, she knows how to turn heads.
Stunning Robin is the diamond in the Rouse family crown. If her of high society. Bruce and Darlene stand helpless as their eldest son becomes a full-time burnout.
It was doubly frustrating to his parents, who are strivers and achievers.
Their once promising son is now on a losing streak. And back at the Rouse mansion, the stakes get even higher.
Ow! What are you doing?
Tell me right now, it is happening. It is happening. It is happening. It is happening. What's happening, guys?
The Wolfman's baby brother is starting to act wild himself.
Where have you boys been? Have you been drinking?
Billy's out being more rebellious. Billy's hanging out with people that Bruce and Darlene certainly don't approve of.
Mother has had enough.
Go to your room now.
Darlene finds the whole situation unacceptable, and it's embarrassing her. There she is with her bridge club or the country club. What are they saying behind her back about the two boys?
Look at your son's face. You know what? I want you out of this house.
You're banished to the servants' quarters. He's no longer allowed free and easy access into the main house.
Darlene told him, "You're not part of the family at this point."
Kurt has gone from riches to rags. And for Darlene, Billy, Robin, and Bruce, life is now on shaky ground. Up next, the mansion's thick walls are shaken by a shotgun's thunderous roar. For the Rouse family of Libertyville, Illinois, life on Easy Street has hit a pothole. Millionaire Bruce tries to cheer up his wife Darlene the only way he knows how, with an expensive gift.
Darlene thought she was going to have the perfect family and the perfect house with the perfect husband. And here she has two kids who are both into drugs, who are both giving her a lot of trouble, and this is not what she expected.
It will take more than a shiny new toy to fix this family. Bruce and Darlene have exiled their problem child, Kurt, to the servants' quarters on the edge of the property. Hardly what he'd call punishment.
Kurt loves it. He's got his own space. He's away from his parents. He doesn't have to listen to them.
It offered him a lot of freedom and privacy to do what he wanted.
Non-stop parties and overnight girlfriends aren't the punishment Kurt's parents had in mind. And if the goal was to separate him from his teenage brother, well, that's backfired too. Kurt and Billy are spending more time together than ever.
Billy's like any teenager. He's into drinking and alcohol and hanging out with his friends and doing drugs. and wants no part of the lifestyle that Bruce and Darlene are trying to push on him.
He did go to an alternative school, which is designed to work with troubled kids, and even then he gets into some trouble.
Left to their own devices, life has become an endless party. Of course, their behavior isn't going totally unnoticed. Middle sister Robin, that schoolgirl Snoop, is reporting back to Darlene on all the debauchery.
She really wants to be this daughter who's everything her parents want her to be, a positive light amidst the turmoil that's going on behind the scenes.
Probably upset her brothers a little bit because she was the goody two-shoes little girl, and these two didn't want to go along with the program.
With the Rouse boys descending into chaos, Darlene begs Bruce to intervene.
Darlene is doing this out of desperation because she feels something could be spinning out of control. She doesn't do something drastic.
But instead of imposing any discipline, Bruce tries to bargain.
They actually offered Kurt money if he would enlist in the military, but he didn't seem too interested in that.
Bruce fails to set anyone straight. Tensions within the family tick like a time bomb. Something or someone is bound to go off. On a cool June night, a great storm rolls into Libertyville.
One of those hot summer nights, huge torrential downpours of rain and thunder.
Wind whipping the eaves of the house, and bursts of thunderclaps so loud that you couldn't hear anything else.
By the following morning, the storm has subsided, but a murder mystery is just beginning. "8 a.m. One of Bruce's employees calls.
And the employee said, "Hey, Bruce isn't at work yet. Is he not feeling well today or something?"
Hey, Robin, can you go check on Daddy and show up at the office today? Yeah, I'll let you know. Okay.
Robin goes into her parents' bedroom. And is confronted with a scene of unimaginable horror.
Robin alerts Billy, who in turn calls police.
A call was placed to 911.
Libertyville Police? Yeah, this is Billy Rouse. My parents were killed in bed.
Police race to the Rouse mansion, where they find all 3 of the children outside on the wet lawn, in utter shock.
One of the first things they do is the protective sweep of the entire house.
The cavernous home seems utterly devoid of life. Satisfied the attacker has fled, officers immediately call in the homicide squad.
When I arrived at the residence, I was immediately directed into the bedroom area. There were 2 bodies in the bed.
There was blood spatter all over the room, pieces of brain matter on the wall. Well, it was a pretty violent scene.
It appears Darlene Rouse was killed first.
Mrs. Rouse's head was missing.
The direct contact wound to her head area with a shotgun. There was a lot of damage there.
But poor Darlene's quick death seems almost merciful compared to what her husband endured.
Bruce evidently started to sit up in bed. He was struck by the pellets from the blast of the shotgun.
His jaws is basically blown off.
But that wasn't enough to put down Bruce Rouse.
He was also bludgeoned in the head with the butt of the shotgun.
And the police saw 5 individual stab wounds, each of which went directly into Mr. Rouse's heart.
At first, the motive seems obvious.
We discovered that Darlene's jewelry was missing. We also discovered that her purse was missing.
Perhaps this was a home invasion gone bad.
There's a wrinkle in this theory.
There was a gun case that Bruce Rouse's guns were kept in.
Every gun was gone.
There's one or the other. You know, you're a jewelry thief or you're a gun thief. You're typically not a jewelry and gun thief. That's not normal.
Then again, there's nothing normal about this case or this crime scene. Secrets could be hidden in every shadowy nook of Rouse Manor. Time to find out whether its 3 surviving inhabitants, Kurt, Robin, and Billy, have some deadly secrets of their own.
The person that did this was in a state of rage and a lot of hatred.
Up next, 3 Rouse children, 2 intriguing clues, and 1 clever killer. The murders of Libertyville socialites Bruce and Darlene Rouse have left their mansion soaked in blood. But real clues are few and far between.
Evidence technicians are collecting this evidence, taking samples from all the things that they're finding. They collect the teeth. They do swabs of blood.
It wasn't necessarily what evidence was found, it was what lack of evidence was there.
Police search every corner of the giant home for any trace of a trespasser and come up dry.
No foreign fingerprints, no signs of forced entry into the home. There was nothing that would indicate that there was any kind of outside intruder.
Kurt, his younger brother Billy, and middle sister Robin all appear devastated by their parents' deaths. Still, police can't rule any of them out as suspects.
There was a question at that point of all of the kids having some knowledge that could help break the case.
Young Billy can't imagine who would want to hurt his parents. And if anything was weighing on his dad's mind, he didn't show it.
Billy says that Bruce comes home and spent a pretty pleasant evening with Billy. There was nothing to indicate anything out of the ordinary.
Eldest sibling Kurt tells detectives that back in the servants' quarters, he and his girlfriend slept through the storm and the murder.
Kurt's statement was that he was with his girlfriend and that he knew of nothing that had happened. Kurt's girlfriend said the same thing. She said she was with Kurt for a while. She did leave to go home and that she knew nothing as well.
So far, Kurt and Billy have been helpful and forthcoming. But their sister Robin seems a tad more evasive.
She was staring off into space and not responding to any questions being posed to her.
Finally, she snaps out of her daydream.
She looked up at me and she said, "If you want to talk to me, you will have to sit right down here next to me in the grass." So I sat down and I started talking and asking some simple questions. Do you remember what happened?
Robin says she went to a dance. She comes home around midnight, goes to bed. Nothing out of the ordinary there.
Before the investigator has a chance to press Robin for more, the interview comes to an abrupt halt.
At that point, her uncle shows up with an attorney.
The officers, they were essentially shut down at that time from speaking further to him.
From that point on, all three of those children were represented by lawyers. Real simply put, the investigation was stopped before it really got a chance to start.
It's a stunning setback, but detectives aren't beat yet. There's an intriguing new clue right in front of them.
Mr. Rouse's car was parked near the house.
And oddly, the wipers have been used.
Looking back at Bruce's activities the day prior, we knew that when Bruce arrived home, the storm was not active at that point. So there would be no need for the windshield wipers to be on. At some point in time after that storm had started that night, someone had moved that car.
And that's not all.
They found a set of keys above the visor of the car, which is not normal. There was a crescent-shaped blood source in the trunk.
Evidence of a post-murder joyride? Investigators won't have long to ponder that question. They're soon summoned to the bank of a nearby river, where another piece of the puzzle has surfaced.
A surveyor saw a pipe sticking up. And when he pulled that pipe up, it happened to be a shotgun.
He called the local authorities. We were able to get a serial number, and lo and behold, discovered that this was, in fact, one of the guns that was in Bruce Rouse's collection.
And that's not the only sunken treasure.
The other guns that were missing from the Rouse residence were located. The jewelry box was also located, and all the pieces of jewelry.
Clearly, this killer wasn't in it for the loot.
It told us that somebody tried to make it look like it was a robbery attempt and get rid of the evidence.
Now, the big push becomes to try and figure out how is it that they got down in this river.
Here is this beautiful community that is highly affluent, and suddenly, right in the middle of their community, is a very brutal murder. 2 people in their beds at night. It was shocking.
More horrifying? Everyone's convinced one of the couple's own children is responsible for the murders.
Frankly, people are going to talk. I don't care what kind of town it is. When 2 of your prominent citizens are murdered, it's going to create a buzz.
It had to be one of the kids. It had to be, with that much brutality and anger.
And the odds-on favorite is wild-eyed elder brother, Kurt.
Obviously, there was some friction between Kurt and his mother and father. I think the assumption of most people, even a lot of investigators, was Kurt was the man that did this.
This is the guy everyone is calling the Wolfman. You know, with the long hair and the beard and the drugs and the rock and roll.
Still others think Bad News Billy is to blame.
Billy has this history of delinquency, and he has this history of problematic behavior.
Then there's the supposedly perfect daughter, Robin. Her parents served her life on a silver platter. But is it ever enough?
When she wanted to go to the mall to shop, she was given not 1, but 2 credit cards.
This heiress has grown accustomed to the finer things in life. And with her parents dead, she and her brothers never need to leave that lap of luxury.
Weak link in this case. She is the best person to reveal that her 2 brothers might have been involved in this.
Detectives repeatedly ask Robin to submit to an interview. Finally, she agrees to tell investigators everything she knows. It's their last, best chance to solve the case.
The thought process was that for her testimony, Robin was going to be granted immunity from any prosecution.
The day before Robin's police interview, there's a violent storm. Just like the one that hit Libertyville the night of the murders.
Huge thunderstorms going on. Robin is coming home from Wisconsin.
Her car slams into a utility pole. And at that point, the one person who may have been able to break open the case for authorities is now dead.
Can her death really be a coincidence?
And we thought somebody did something to that car because she knew something.
The public thinks Kurt altered the brakes in her car. He killed his parents, and now he's killed his sister to shut her up.
Have police missed their only chance to uncover who killed Bruce and Darlene Rouse? Was it elder son Kurt, sick of his parents' scrutiny? Did young Billy's teenage mischief spiral out of control? Or did Robin die with a deadly secret? Up next, the Rouse killer is finally revealed by a guilty conscience. In the years after the brutal murders of Bruce and Arlene Rouse, their once magnificent estate has become a dark, cold shell of its former self.
For a long time, the Rouse residence stands off almost like a house of horrors.
The mysterious midnight attack continues to haunt Libertyville residents and detectives.
All the leads that were generated, all the evidence that would produce any leads, had all been followed up on. The investigation went cold.
The only thing that would put this case to rest is a confession.
But even after the darkest of storms, the sun will shine again.
A call came in, and it was a sheriff's department in Key West, Florida. He says, well, I understand you're interested in a fellow by the name of Billy Rouse. We have him in custody down here. He was arrested as a result of his involvement in a bank robbery.
I said, boy, this would be a great opportunity to see if he would talk to us again. We flew to Key West.
Surprisingly, Billy agrees to a chat.
Billy was brought into the investigative area of the sheriff's department, and we said, Billy, how you doing? You remember us?
He indicates that he had been waiting a really, really long time for authorities to catch up to him.
I said, listen, this thing's been going on for years. I'm sure it's been bothering you. It's about time to put the demons to rest.
Billy finally agrees to tell the truth about what happened to his parents on that awful stormy night.
On the day that the crime happened, Billy had been out, he was doing some drugs, and he was drinking. He got home in the evening hours.
Mom.
Where have you been?
Oh, what's the care?
Billy and his mom come face to face in the kitchen. His mom comes up to him and says, let me look at your eyes. Let me smell your breath.
Did you see the drinking?
She said, you've been drinking, smoking pot. I know you're not going to amount to nothing. I'm going to tell your father when he wakes up.
For the troubled young man, his mother's threats are the last straw.
Billy told us that he just got fed up with his mother, constantly degrading him.
You think you're a man that you're not. You're just a little boy.
She threatened that she was going to send him away to a military school because he was doing nothing on his own, and he was going to end up just like his brother Kurt, a nobody and nothing.
This is something that
He said it took half my father's face away, but it wasn't enough to kill him. And he said he's still sitting there moving.
Billy said he then went around to the side of the bed and then took the butt of the gun and hit his dad in the head as hard as he could.
So he said, I left the room, I went into the kitchen, I grabbed the knife out of the drawer and came back in and I stabbed him in the chest, and he said, that ended it.
Billy may have been drunk, stoned, and frenzied, yet he was thinking clearly enough to cover his tracks.
He's gonna make this look like a residential burglary gone bad. He's gonna take the jewelry box. He's gonna take all the shotguns and get rid of them.
Put them all in his father's car, drove around for quite a while. He parked the car on a bridge. He took all of those items and threw them in the river.
He didn't tell Kurt what he did to his parents. He didn't.
Libertyville needs to know to finish its healing.
Billy Rouse may take that answer to his grave. The many tragedies that befell Murder Mansion finally culminated in the home's own demise when it mysteriously burned to the ground, finally turning.
On a cold Sunday morning in Moscow, Idaho, a college town so small and so familiar that people once measured danger in rumors rather than sirens. 4 University of Idaho students were killed inside the off-campus house at 1122 King Road in the early hours of November 13, 2022. The victims were Ethan Chapin, Shana Kernodle, Madison Morgan, and Kaylee Goncalves, and authorities later identified their deaths as homicides by stabbing. Early official updates said the victims were likely asleep when the attack began, that some had defensive wounds, and that there was no sign of sexual assault. ci.moscow.id.us won by the time daylight spread across the wet pavement and bare branches of that hill. The house had already changed in the public imagination from a noisy student rental into something darker and harder to name, a place that seemed to pull sound into itself. It stood where college life usually spills outward, where porches gather laughter, where rides arrive late, where shoes pile near doorways, and half-finished cups are left on counters for the next day. But that morning there would be no ordinary next day. There would be only the shape of interruption, the kind so violent that it does not merely end lives, but tears a hole in the rhythm around them, leaving friends, parents, classmates, neighbors, and eventually the entire country staring into a silence that felt impossible for a house built for movement. Because that is what made the first shock so powerful, not only the brutality, not only the number of victims, but the setting itself, a college home, a familiar home. The kind of place where the front door might open and close all night, where music and footsteps and people coming in after midnight do not mean danger, only youth, only routine, only another weekend dissolving slowly into morning. There was nothing in the appearance of that house, in the slope of the yard, in the string lights and parked cars and layered lives inside, that announced what would happen there before dawn. And maybe that is why the story struck so deep, so fast. It did not begin in an abandoned place or a hidden place or a place already marked by threat. It began in the middle of normalcy, in the kind of ordinary scene people trust without thinking, which is often where fear does its most lasting work. The town itself had the look of late autumn in the inland northwest, that thin, brittle season when leaves have mostly given up and the world seems made of dim grass, damp soil, and windows glowing against the cold. Moscow is not the sort of place that prepares you for a story like this. It is a university town, close-knit, small enough that students become landmarks to one another. Small enough that people remember where they saw someone last and which street a friend lives on and who usually works which shift and whose car is always parked where. It is a place where campus and town braid together, where Greek life, coffee shops, rented houses, football weekends, and winter air form a familiar landscape, one that usually feels contained, knowable, domestic. In that setting, the house on King Road had its own pulse. Social and bright, the sort of place many students knew even if they had never stepped inside. Homes like that carry a particular energy. They are temporary, but never feel temporary to the people living in them. They hold evidence of becoming, laundry in corners, hoodies over chairs, makeup on bathroom counters, photos taped to mirrors, group chats lighting up at 2 a.m, a dog scratching softly at a closed door, a delivery dropped outside, the smell of food long after the meal is gone, the low electrical hum of chargers and lamps, and lives in motion. Nothing about such a space suggests finality. Everything about it suggests continuation. That is why the first hours after the killing seemed almost too terrible for the mind to accept. For young people, all of them with futures still spoken of in the present tense, reduced in an instant to names repeated on television, in prayer circles, in police updates, in text messages no one wanted to send. Ethan, Shauna, Madison, Kaylee, names that had belonged only hours earlier to fully living people moving through the familiar choreography of a Saturday night and early Sunday morning, a campus event, a night out, a return home, lights off, phones nearby, the assumption of morning, the assumption that whatever had happened that night had already happened, and the rest would be sleep. That assumption, the most human and innocent one, is what makes the crime scene feel unbearable even before its details are known. The imagination does the cruel work on its own. A house settling in the dark, one room still, another room still, a hallway neither empty nor awake, a world outside carrying on without witness, while inside time is broken into before and after. Even now, years removed from that morning, the image remains sharp because it presses against something larger than a single case. It presses against the illusion of safe thresholds. The belief that once the door closes, the night stays outside. The promise, however fragile, that home is the place where danger has to knock first. In stories like this, the hook is not just what happened. It is what happened to the idea of home afterward. Once that house entered the national vocabulary, it ceased to be only an address. It became a symbol of violated intimacy, of young adulthood interrupted at its most ordinary, of brutality arriving where people were supposed to be most unguarded because they had every reason to feel secure. And in the days that followed, that symbolism grew heavier. Police tape pulled tight, camera crews gathering in the cold, parents arriving with faces altered by the knowledge they had not yet learned how to carry, students walking in clusters, speaking softly, scanning the dark in a town that suddenly looked unfamiliar to its own residents. Fear has a way of changing the geometry of a place. Distances lengthen, shadows sharpen, windows look back, streets once crossed without thought begin to feel exposed. Every late-night walk becomes a calculation. Every stranger becomes briefly significant. In Moscow, grief and fear rose together. One was personal, one communal, but they fed each other until the entire town seemed to be breathing more carefully. And at the center of it all stood the absence of the four victims, each of whom had occupied a different emotional orbit in the lives around them. For young people, but not for abstractions. They had friendships, habits, private jokes, routines. They were known in ways news stories can never fully capture. One person remembered for a laugh, another for loyalty, another for the way they entered a room, another for kindness that seemed ordinary until it was suddenly all anyone wanted back. That is another cruelty of violent death at a young age. It flattens from a distance, but up close it multiplies. Each victim is not one loss but many, a daughter no longer answering, a son no longer coming home, a best friend whose messages stop mid-life, a sibling whose place at the table becomes ceremonial, a classmate whose seat now carries a kind of accusation. Every murder creates a circle of grief, but this one created overlapping circles so wide that no one in that community could stand entirely outside them. Even those who never met the victims understood the age, the setting, the vulnerability, and therefore understood too much. They understood that they could imagine themselves into the story without effort. That is why the case spread so fast across the country. It was horrifying, yes, but also recognizably intimate. The nation did not look away because the victims belonged to an age bracket people are trained to associate with beginning, not ending. College is supposed to be the threshold of expansion. New friends, new freedoms, new identities, first apartments, final semesters, plans that are still soft around the edges because there is time to revise them. At that stage of life, death feels like an insult to chronology itself. It feels out of order. And when death arrives in a way so personal, so physical, inside a home full of young lives, the disorder seems absolute. The public response reflected that. candlelight vigils, flowers, photographs, messages written in thick marker on poster board and sidewalks and memory walls. The language of mourning, repeated because there is little else to do at first, rest in peace, gone too soon, forever in our hearts. But beneath those familiar phrases, there was another current, one less visible and more haunting. People wanted to know how a thing like this enters a house without waking the whole neighborhood into resistance. They wanted to know how a town could hold such violence without any outward sign until morning. They wanted to know what the night sounded like, what the victim's final minutes were like, what was missed, what was noticed, what it means when terror passes through walls and leaves so much of the surrounding world undisturbed. In the early stage of a case, before arrests and courtrooms and legal language begin to impose order, the imagination lives in the gaps, and those gaps were cavernous. The house itself seemed to invite speculation because of its layout, its levels, its bedrooms, its ordinary clutter, its multiple lives unfolding at once under one roof. Official updates later said officers found 2 victims on the 2nd floor and 2 on the 3rd, and that 2 roommates survived. That fact alone was enough to deepen the sense of unreality, as if the house had been split between nightmare and unknowing by only a few walls and a few doors. CI.Moscow.id.S2 It is difficult to think of anything more unsettling than proximity without awareness. Violence moving through shared space while other lives remain suspended in the fragile shelter of sleep, confusion, or misread sounds. That detail, more than almost any other, lodged itself in the public mind because it turned the event from a distant atrocity into something claustrophobic. Not an explosion, not a public attack, not chaos visible from the street, but something hidden long enough to exist first as aftermath. By the time the world understood, the crucial moments were already gone, sealed behind the ordinary surfaces of a student house that had kept its secrets until daylight. And so the story begins as the most haunting stories often do, not with a scream everyone heard, but with a morning that arrived and revealed what the night had been carrying: the pale sky, the cold air, the stunned disbelief, the shift from weekend to nightmare. Before investigators mapped movements, before affidavits and hearings and the long machinery of justice, there was simply the incomprehensible fact of 4 young lives cut short in one house in one small town that would never again be able to say, with the same innocence as before. In the years since, the legal case has advanced dramatically. Bryan Kohberger later pleaded guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary. And in July 2025 he was sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences without parole plus a 10-year burglary sentence. ABC 7 Los Angeles 3 But that comes much later in the story. At the beginning, where we are now, none of that exists yet. There is only the darkness before dawn, the sleeping house, the cold hill above the town, and the terrible, irreversible moment when ordinary life gives way to a kind of silence that does not end when the noise stops. It lingers in hallways, in memorial photos, and emptied bedrooms, in parents' voices, in campus pathways, in the minds of strangers who never set foot in Moscow but still remember the feeling of hearing the news for the first time and realizing, with a chill that had nothing to do with weather, that 4 students had gone to sleep in a place that looked like safety and never woke to see the morning. Before the house on King Road became a fixed point in the American imagination, before television, trucks crowded curbs, and helicopters turned a college town into an aerial map of grief, there was the wider setting that made the crime feel almost impossible to place. Moscow, Idaho, sat among rolling farmland and low winter skies, a university town whose identity was built less on spectacle than on repetition, on the comfort of seeing the same intersections, the same cafes, the same brick campus buildings, the same students moving between classes in sweatshirts and boots while the semester edged toward Thanksgiving. The University of Idaho stood at the center of that rhythm, old enough to carry tradition, small enough to make students feel visible inside it. Greek houses, academic halls, tailgate weekends, part-time jobs, study groups, late-night food runs, and rented houses just off campus all formed part of one shared ecosystem. Nothing in that landscape seemed designed for menace. It was a place where young adulthood could look deceptively simple from the outside, as if life had arranged itself into a series of manageable next steps: finish the semester, graduate, move, start a job, plan a trip, text someone back tomorrow. That illusion of continuation mattered because all four victims were living inside it when they were killed. They were not abstract figures caught in a headline. They were students with habits already underway, identities already taking shape, futures that had begun to develop weight and detail. Madison Morgan and Kaylee Goncalves had grown up in Coeur d'Alene and had been close friends for years, the kind of friendship that begins young and matures into a private language. One built from old memories, shared instincts, and the easy proximity of people who no longer need to explain themselves to each other. Madison was a senior majoring in marketing, and Kaylee, also a senior, was majoring in general studies and was set to graduate early in December 2022 with a job already lined up in Texas. Both women were involved in sorority life, and both were part of the social texture of campus, not because they were symbols of anything grand, but because they were the age college towns are made to hold, young enough for plans to still feel fluid, old enough for those plans to start becoming real. Shana Kernodle, a junior marketing major, had roots in Arizona and Idaho and was also part of the same campus social world. Ethan Chapin, a sophomore studying recreation, sport, and tourism management, was from Mount Vernon, Washington, and was known not only as a student but as a son, a brother, and one of triplets, which made his loss especially hard for many people to absorb because it seemed to tear through a family structure already built on unusual closeness. Together, the four represented not a single friend group in the narrow sense, but a broader web of university life where circles overlap, where people know each other from sororities, fraternities, classes, workplaces, parties, and the casual repetition of a small town. Official and widely reported accounts have consistently identified them as University of Idaho students killed in their off-campus home on November 13, 2022, and later memorial efforts by the university itself centered their names together, a sign of how fully their stories had become part of the institution's own memory. University of Idaho won the house at 1122 King Road fit naturally into that world before it became notorious. It was not a hidden place. It was a student residence, 3 stories on a hillside, with bedrooms spread across levels, and a second-floor entrance, the kind of layout that made sense in a rented college house where movement is constant and privacy is imperfect. The structure itself carried the marks of ordinary student living, different schedules, different rooms glowing at different hours, shoes left near doors, cars coming and going, texts sent from upstairs to downstairs, friends stopping by. The noise and clutter that make a house feel inhabited rather than staged. In a larger city, such a residence might disappear into 1,000 others, but in Moscow, houses near campus form part of a visible social map. People know where gatherings happen. They know which porches stay lit. They know which places feel active even when the street itself is quiet. That kind of familiarity can create a sense of safety that is not formally reasoned out so much as absorbed. The house was not secure because anyone had carefully audited every risk. It was secure because it belonged to the category of places that seemed too ordinary to fear. In the fall of 2022, that distinction mattered even more because the semester was moving into one of its most transitional stretches. The weather was deepening toward winter. Trees had thinned. Nights came earlier. Students were juggling routines that felt both repetitive and temporary, with exams still ahead but holiday travel already faintly visible on the horizon. The emotional atmosphere of late fall on a college campus is its own kind of weather. People begin to think about endings and departures while still living intensely in the present. That dual feeling, half momentum and half anticipation, seems to have surrounded the victims in the days before the murders. Kaylee Goncalves, according to broad reporting and family accounts repeated after the killings, had returned to Moscow for the weekend and was preparing for graduation and a move. Madison and Shauna were balancing student life with part-time work at the Mad Greek restaurant in town. Ethan remained tied to the close bonds of fraternity and family life that gave his name a particular emotional resonance in the aftermath. These are the details that transform a crime story from a record of violence into a record of interruption. They show lives in motion, not frozen images. They remind us that the victims were inhabiting calendars, not just names. AP News to the Saturday before the killings followed a pattern that, from a distance, looked utterly familiar for students in a college town. Ethan Chapin and Shauna Kernodle were believed by investigators to have been at the Sigma Chi house on the University of Idaho campus until about 1:45 a.m. Madison Morgan and Kaylee Goncalves spent part of the evening at the Corner Club of downtown bar, and later stopped at a food truck before returning home at about 1:56 a.m. Those movements were included in early official timelines released by Moscow police and later reflected in court and media summaries. They matter in a narrative sense because they root the night in common ritual rather than warning. These were not people moving through obviously dangerous circumstances. They were living what, in many college towns, would be recognized as a normal Saturday night. Friends around them would have interpreted their movements as unremarkable. A bar, a fraternity house. Food after midnight, a ride home. A phone call left unanswered. The simple choreography of youth. The fact that ordinary habits framed the final hours is one reason the case struck so deeply beyond Idaho. It suggested that catastrophe had not followed some glaring departure from routine. It had emerged from inside routine itself. CI.Moscow.id.us 3 Part of the context, 2 lies in what Moscow was not. It was not a city accustomed to seeing itself on national crime broadcasts. It was not a place whose identity had been built around chronic violence. The shock after the murders was intensified by the community's own sense that such a crime did not belong to its scale or self-image. University towns live on a fragile balance. They are old enough to have institutional memory and young enough to renew themselves every autumn. Thousands of students arrive carrying the assumptions of youth, among them the belief that danger belongs elsewhere, in larger places, in darker stories, in neighborhoods someone has already warned you about. Moscow had enough community familiarity for people to feel oriented. That orientation was one of the first things the murders shattered. After November 13th, familiar routes changed character. Off-campus rentals no longer looked merely social. Windows and doors became part of a mental inventory. Students who had once come and gone without much thought began to reevaluate lateness, solitude, unlocked entrances. The difference between a harmless noise and the kind that should make you stand up from bed. That transformation did not begin with the arrest. It began with context collapsing. A town that had functioned through trust found itself reorganizing around suspicion. Idaho State Police, for yet context, is not only geographic or social, it is emotional. To understand the force of this case, one has to understand how campus life magnifies both presence and loss. Students at that age often live publicly without realizing it. Their lives spill into shared spaces. They eat together, post together, attend parties together, move in clusters between houses and campus buildings. Leave digital traces and physical routines that make them feel vividly alive to those around them. When someone dies under those circumstances, absence becomes visible in dozens of small ways. A room goes dark, a shift is uncovered, a message remains unread. A seat in class becomes strangely permanent in its emptiness. A photograph that once looked casual begins to feel ceremonial. In a college setting, grief does not remain private for long because so much of life is communal. That was especially true here. The 4 victims were mourned not only by relatives and intimate friends but by sorority sisters, fraternity brothers, classmates, co-workers, teammates in the looser emotional sense of campus belonging, and by students who knew them only as familiar faces but still felt the magnitude of what had been taken. The university later created a healing garden and memorial space that specifically includes their names. University of Idaho 1. There is also the unsettling context of architecture. Student houses are not built like fortresses. They are built or repurposed for density and convenience. Bedrooms can be tucked at odd angles. Floor plans can be intuitive to residents and confusing to outsiders. Entrances may reflect the slope of land rather than any ideal of security. The King Road House embodied that kind of improvisational domesticity. It was a place where several young women lived together, where a boyfriend sometimes stayed over, where rooms on different levels could feel separate while still belonging to one household. The familiarity of such arrangements makes them emotionally vulnerable in a specific way. They are homes, yes, but temporary ones shaped by leases and semesters and furniture that can be moved out in a single weekend. That transience encourages a kind of optimism. People decorate for the life they are living now, not for worst-case scenarios. They plan parties, not escape routes. They stack blankets, not fears. When violence erupts in such a place, it seems to punish not recklessness, but trust. Even years later, the image of that house remains central because it represented a threshold many people recognized from their own youth. Not everyone has lived in Moscow, but countless people have lived in a house like that, with roommates upstairs, doors opening late, laughter filtering through walls, and the assumption that morning will arrive without incident. Wikipedia 5. By the time authorities and reporters began piecing together the timeline, the context had already turned the case into something larger than a local homicide. It had become a national mirror reflecting a familiar fear, that the ordinary arrangements of young life are more fragile than they appear. That fear deepened because the victims themselves were easy to imagine not as strangers, but as versions of people almost everyone knows, the loyal longtime friend, the couple whose plans seemed to extend naturally into the next semester, the daughter on the brink of graduation, the son whose family pride feels visible even from the outside. These archetypes can sound reductive when flattened into headlines, but in narrative they matter because they help explain why the case lingered. People did not only register the brutality, they registered the stolen continuity. They saw a house full of beginnings abruptly converted into an ending. That is what makes the context of this crime so haunting. It was not set against alienation or obvious ruin. It was set against belonging, against friendship, against the final ordinary weeks of a semester, against a college town whose rituals depended on the belief that youth, for all its chaos, still unfolds inside a basic perimeter of safety. On King Road, that belief broke, and once it broke, everything around it changed shape. The campus looked the same but no longer felt the same. The town kept standing where it had always stood, between fields and roads and university buildings. But the emotional weather had changed. Names once spoken casually were now spoken in memorial services. A rental house once known for movement became known for silence. And the 4 students at the center of it all, Ethan Chapin, Shana Kernodle, Madison Moggan, and Kaylee Goncalves, came to embody not only the human cost of one violent night but the destruction of a whole atmosphere of normalcy that had seemed, until then, almost too ordinary to fail. AP News 2. To understand what was lost in Moscow, it is not enough to remember the crime. It is necessary to return as carefully as possible to the people whose lives filled that house before it became a crime scene, to the 4 students whose names were spoken first in panic. then in grief, and later in memorials carved into the institution they had belonged to. The University of Idaho has since inscribed Ethan Chapin, Shawna Kernodle, Madison Morgan, and Kaylee Goncalves into its memorial landscape, a formal acknowledgement that their absence did not remain private but became part of the university's own history. University of Idaho won yet before any memorial. They existed in the vivid, unstructured way young people do through friendships, routines, plans, side conversations, photographs taken without ceremony, and futures still unfolding with the easy confidence of people who believed there would be time for the next thing. Madison Morgan was 21, a senior majoring in marketing, and in nearly every public remembrance of her there is a sense of warmth moving ahead of her, as if she arrived in people's memories smiling before any other details settled into place. She had grown up in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and shared with Kaylee Goncalves the kind of long friendship that does not need constant explanation because it has already weathered childhood, adolescence, and the strange expanding years of early adulthood. Accounts published